Welcome to the Storycraft Cafe. Come in, grab a cup of your favorite beverage, and get ready to join the storytelling conversation. Storycraft Cafe is brought to you by Dabble, the ultimate cloud-based fiction writing software. Here we're going to bring together storytellers from all walks to encourage and empower you to craft your best story. Thanks for joining us once again here in the Storycraft Cafe. We've got a dynamite show for you as always. Jade Shyback joins us to talk about writing young adult dystopian mashup fiction. It's a great show. You're going to love it. Be sure to join us over at storycraft.cafe so that you can be notified of new shows coming up, interviews that we do live on YouTube, that you can join in. You can post comments and, join in the conversation live while it's going on. We're going to be shifting focus on the podcast a little bit. We're still going to be bringing you author interviews that you, love and, with people that are publishing now and, talking about what's going on in the industry and in crafting stories. But we're also going to bring you more educational content. We've been getting comments from people wanting to, us to explore different things like different forms of plotting or character development or world building or, anything that involves crafting your story. We're going to be bringing you those kinds of shows as well as our author interviews. So I say that to just ask you to please be patient with us as we shift focus a little bit, but I think you're really going to love the content we're going to be bringing you. Storycraft.cafe is the place to come join in the conversation and join a community of like-minded writers like you. Now on to our show. And we are live here in the Storycraft Cafe. I'm your host, Hank Garner. And today I am so excited to have Jade Shyback on the show with me. She's got an amazing book. Aqueous is the first book, I hope, in a series that is forthcoming. It is a futuristic, dystopian sci-fi / fantasy. It's such a genre bending book, but this was so much fun to read. Welcome to the show, Jade.
Thanks for having me, Hank.
I'm excited to have you, and I apologize to any of our listeners who might be joining us late. We had a couple of technical difficulties we had to work through, but we're here now and happy to have you on the show, Jade. Jade, I like to start each show with a fun question to get things started. What is your first memory of wanting to be a writer or storyteller?
I just think that came through reading, to be honest with you. I would read books and just be fascinated by them and the places they would take me. I was, as a small child, out in the prairies in Alberta. So, I had the same view every day across vast fields of emptiness, wheat fields. And the places I could journey to in my imagination were great. And then I had that voice that would say, I think you could do this. And actually, I never tried to do it. I didn't try to do it until I was, in my late 40s. But that voice was always there saying this should be something on your bucket list.
Now, I'm always fascinated by people's journey to writing and publishing because of the many, many interviews that I've done. It's a very rare few that writing and publishing have been their singular focus. Most people, know early on that they want to tell stories. They want to write books. And then, you get busy with, paying bills and raising a family and, just collecting life experiences, and writing, drifts farther and farther away. But there's always something that brings it back. You have a fascinating story of traveling the world and working in areas that on the surface don't seem to have anything to do with writing. But what was it that brought you back around?
I just had more free time. I started later in life because as to your point, you've got to pay the bills. You need to have that stable career. The mortgage comes along, the children follow, the pets follow. So there's not a lot of time for this. Even in the evenings, I wanted to spend time with my kids. I didn't have time to sit down for 4 hours in one go and at the computer and write after I'd been all day in front of a computer working. So it was always part of the family conversation. And I think as my children were leaving, I have 3 daughters. And as they were leaving, they said, okay, stop moping around. This isn't the end of the world. It's actually time for you to start writing your book. And as my eldest graduated, we took this great trip down the PCH highway. That was her dream. So we did that as a family. And while we were trapped in the car today, or for all of those hours on that trip, on those days, I said, let's start to brainstorm a story. So I came up with a concept and asked him a lot of questions. And that became a very fun family game during those hours in the car from San Francisco to LA, where we just hashed out some stuff and Aqueous was born.
And driving down the PCH, you had the visual stimulation for what I can only assume birthed this story. I have a vision in my mind of you driving down that highway, looking at the ocean and all of this starting to come alive.
We were very impacted, Hank, because there had just been the fires in Malibu. And then we had a landslide after the fires. The landslide, as you know, went through Big Sur and wiped out the PCH. So we had to take a detour. We had visited Monterey, the aquarium, Moss Landing. And then after that, we could not continue through Big Sur. We had to take a detour. And I was actually just gassing up the car. I was planning to drive back up. Now I think I had to go back to Santa Barbara perhaps and get on the 101. I'm not from that area. So, but I was at the gas station and this fellow gassing up next to me said, no, you can take this road called the, I believe it's the Nacimiento Road, that goes through a military base. So I gassed up the tank and thought, well, that's excellent news. On we'll go. And the road is hair raising. It's just cliffs and turns and one lane. And we thought we were going to go off the side. And we had this great view of the ocean on one side. And we had all this crispy land on the other side, on the hillside. And it just made us think, what happens when the sun is so hot and angry that we have nowhere left to go? What if everything burns? And that's how we got to this premise of this world under the water.
Wow. To backtrack for just a minute, you went to college or university, as you guys up north say, and did you study English? Do I have that part right?
English literature. Mm-hmm.
English literature. So a perfect education for someone who's going to become a writer. And
perfect, unless your parents think it's useless and they say, you're just going to work with your dad because you're really wasting your time here, Jade. Mm-hmm.
Well, then you went to work in finance, right? Which is, of course, the perfect next step from studying English literature to becoming an author. You have to work in finance. That's part of the training, right?
You have to work with your dad, Jade, is what they said. So go and get a job. And the job with my dad was at an insurance company. So I spent 15 years working in insurance, which is a very, very stable career. Lots of nice people there. But I don't necessarily think I was a small child saying, wow, I can't wait to get to the insurance company and stay there for the rest of my life.
Yeah. Well, I talk to a lot of writers and you hear this story over and over again if you ask someone for writing advice. And I think Stephen King in his book on writing said it again, that to become a writer, you really need to do 2 things. You need to read a lot because you need to understand how stories work. And then you need to write a lot. You need to practice. And I think that you need to actually add a third to that. And the third I would add is you need to interact with a lot of people because you need to understand how conversations work and how interpersonal relationships, the give and the take of just being with other humans. And I would think a job like the insurance business, where you meet a lot of people, you interact with people probably a lot of times on their best days and their worst days. I would think that those were things that you could file away in your writer toolkit, even if you didn't know you were doing it.
Absolutely. And to your point, the worst days, people, insurance clients call the insurance company when they're having some sort of tragedy. Right. So you really have to be empathetic to that, and you have to be helpful. But everything in life, it's building blocks of a great story. So, I left Alberta, I moved to Ontario, but then I went onward to the Middle East. I left insurance. I fell into an IT company that had me traveling through the Middle East, lecturing on anti-money laundering and the counter-financing of terrorism. Then I ended up at a commodities exchange, running their compliance department, and just all of these travels and all of these people and experiences. And then personal things, I got divorced. That was really hard. When you get divorced, the main concern, aside from how will you afford it, is who gets the kids and do you see the kids? And that's a big theme in Aqueous also, is this battle for the kids and the relationships between parents and kids and that dynamic.
What was it like moving to the Middle East from Alberta and then Toronto to the other part of the world? That had to be culture shock?
I thought that the biggest culture shock was Alberta to Ontario, to be honest with you. Yeah, Canada is vast and Canada has a lot of great people in it, but they are very different. Yeah. And then when I went to them, and Toronto is a very fast city. It's like New York. So everyone's very busy. They have layers and layers, generations of family already. There's not a lot of time for newcomers per se. When I went to the Middle East, the Emirates is a very unique place because 20% of the population at that time was local and 80% was expatriate. So everybody needs a friend. And it was really easy to jump into that community and meet new people. So, and people from all over the world and just learn new things. But it was a very welcoming, inclusive environment. I had a great time while I was there.
My family and I moved out west for a couple of years, a couple of decades ago now. But the city we moved to had like 5 military bases in it. So everyone in that city was from somewhere else. They all got transferred in, and it was a similar experience that everyone's looking for a friend. Everyone's looking to connect with someone. And it was ironically very easy to make connections in a place where no one has any roots.
Right. And I haven't put this together before, Hank, but now that we're talking about this, I believe that maybe Marisol, my protagonist, as you know, she winds up in a place she wasn't meant to be. Yes. And she has to make all of those connections as a very young person with new people, with strangers. And so, maybe that's where that storyline came from. I hadn't connected that before, but that could be part of it.
Yeah, it could be. It's so funny that some people think about themes and kind of the subtext of a book before they start writing, but most of the time I've learned that these things emerge in the writing, and it's only from the finish point looking back that you can see those things emerge. It's one more piece of magic to add to the
layer
writing.
That's right. And it's always better when you have many stories, many plot lines twist and turn together, entwined from the beginning until the end. And I certainly, in my experience, this is my debut novel, but certainly I found that different storylines and the activities of the characters, they revealed themselves to me. I knew the beginning and I knew the end, and I had to fill it in. And that it became quite full and rich as I tried to do that. But there was a lot of content, a lot of things I wanted to put in there to make the story believable and the characters relatable and believable.
Yeah. How long were you in the Emirates?
About 9.5 years, just short of 10 years.
Oh, wow. Is there anything else that shows up in the book that was influenced from your time there?
Well, I just think the heat, when you walk out the door in Abu Dhabi and it's 52 degrees Celsius base temperature, I don't know what that is in Fahrenheit, but it's a lot. And they don't give you the Humidex. They don't give you the Humidex because you don't want to know. And I think a lot of times it doesn't climb over 52, even though the car says 53 or 54, because, there's safety precautions. At some point, the airplane shouldn't take off and things should just stop working. But that's expensive to shut down industries and make things stop and hold people up. So, they had 5-word weather over there, and it changed every day. Today is sunny, hot again, wow, look at blue sky. I think we had clouds 6 days a year. Usually, unfortunately, it was on the day of the PGA tournament. The European Tour would show up and those boys always, clouds and rain. But the sun element and trying to survive in that and just what you do, of course, that's part of the story.
Yeah. Aqueous is a science fiction slash fantasy slash dystopian novel. It really has a foot in all of these genres, and it's like a 6-footed creature, apparently. But were you always a fan of these types of stories?
Oh, I think so. I think, unfortunately, young adult fiction, which tends to always kind of grapple with these themes or these genres. A lot of people don't read it, and it's very crossover. And I always really liked it. I could have made my characters slightly older. I could have made them 18, but I felt like in the world they were living in, Aqueous, it's rooted in math and science and survival. So these kids grew up really quick. They're graduating and being assigned almost as engineers in their life's work at the age of 16. So because they're 16, that's how it became young adult. But if we look at all the stories that I like, the Hunger Games and Divergent and now you have like Station 11, you have young characters kind of leading the way, solving the problems, changing the world, coming up with the solutions. And I really like that. Also I had my own teenage daughters at the time. So one of their friends who read the novel recently said, wow, did you help your mom with the dialogue? And they said, no, she just does teenage speak because she's around us all the time. Right. Slay the day and that kind of stuff.
One of the things I loved a lot about the book was the merstations. Where did the idea for that come from?
Well, I did mix up languages a little bit. So mer is the French word for sea. So it was just, a station under the sea. But the premise of this is, I don't know if you saw that movie. It was fantastic. Don't Look Up. I just thought that was fantastic. We're not all going to make it to space. Elon Musk is working on this, and so is Jeff Bezos and all of them. But Richard Branson, there's not going to be enough room for everyone. And it just seemed to me if we were, decimated by fire and heat at some point, rising sea levels, we've still got this great ecosystem, this vast ocean that we know nothing about. Well, we know some things about it, but we know far less than we should. Right. And there are some really dynamic, deep parts of the ocean that we have very little information about that are safely tucked away from the sun. And so if the sun is personified and the sun is out to punish us and make us pay for kind of our greed and our misdeeds in the way that the planet was treated, where can we go? And these merstations, there's 3 of them in the deepest parts of the ocean. They became my solution for an environment where we could potentially survive.
It is reminiscent of, stories that we heard growing up of the lost city of Atlantis.
20 Leagues Under the Sea, all that stuff.
Yeah, and it's so fun. I've heard a lot of comparison from this story to the Hunger Games, which you mentioned a minute ago. But there's a little different outlook. Yes, there's a competitive nature like there is in the Hunger Games, but I kind of view this story as a little more hopeful and a little more, there's everything's not bleak. I'm not sure. I'm grasping for words here, but there's, it just does, it's dystopian without being, feudal and without being just, nihilist, in the end. How did your worldview kind of impact your view of this very bleak future?
Well, I think we're kind of in the bleak future now. Unfortunately, we had some stories, some events this year that were just horrible, and yet we couldn't look away. So if we take, for example, the Ocean Gate Titan disaster, I mean, that was a week where we were glued to our televisions or screens, hoping for a good outcome, probably assuming the worst, but we couldn't look away. And then we had the Lahaina fires, just heartbreaking stuff. And so those elements are in this story, which I guess make things bleak, but the humanity of the story and the people working together trying to find solutions, and the equality. They don't have a lot of individual possessions. They are all uniform until the end. And it's not until the end that we understand that there is control. There is a different agenda. We don't even really know who the antagonist is until the end. Everyone just assumes it's going to be that annoying guy named Felix. And then that is flipped. And then at the end, the true nature of the secrecy and the deceit is revealed at the very end, which of course is perfect because it lends itself towards more stories, which is what I need. And when I started, I really didn't want to become a one-hit wonder. I knew I had a lot of material, and I really wanted to cut it into a few books because everybody loves a trilogy. Oh yeah.
So from this trip down PCH with your girls, and you guys are brainstorming and coming up with story ideas, and you, from your description, this is something that you had talked about, had always assumed that at least as a hobby, this was part of who you were. How did you go from this brainstorming session with your girls to actually putting pen to paper or hands to keyboard and actually get the process started?
So there was an outline just on my phone to start with, just chapter headings, trying to lay it out in a way that would be interesting. And then I started, like I think everybody does at the beginning, I filled in a few chapters, and then I realized I really had the end, could really see the ending. So I wanted to fill that in. And there is a link to the very last few paragraphs to something that happens, like a scene in, I think it's chapter 3. And then I had to fill in the middle. I actually didn't have at the beginning the trials. The trials are a huge part of the competitive nature of the book, and it kind of lends itself to what these kids have to go through in their training. It's kind of the buy-in. Every good dystopian needs slogans and brainwashing, and there's really no need for these kids to compete against each other, and they're dangerous. The trials are dangerous, and the trials are scary. So I didn't have that when I first started, and I put that. I came to that later on, probably after my daughter had gone to university and everyone was busy. So I no longer really had them around locked in a car to brainstorm with me. But I mean, that was my process. I spend a lot of time thinking and dreaming. I spend a lot less time in front of my computer typing it out. When I'm in front of the computer, that's just typing. When I'm driving in the car with the radio turned off, or I'm sitting on the sofa with my coffee and it looks like I'm doing nothing, my mind is actually racing through ideas and solutions and conversations with characters. It's a great way to just kind of spend time with myself. I think as I get older, I get a little bit more introverted. People expect an extrovert, but I do like having just quiet time at home. And this really lends itself to building these stories.
Yeah. You said that you envisioned a series. Did you think of it in terms of a series from the very beginning, or did you start writing it and then think, okay, I need to find kind of an arc for this, and then figure out how to continue that arc, into subsequent editions?
I knew I wanted a very action-packed ending for the first book. And I knew I wanted some answers, but not all the answers. And as you know, as a reader, you know how it ends, and it just leaves so many unanswered questions. So, I could see really early on that I had 3 books and I wanted 3 books. I didn't want to just write one and then have to come up with a whole new idea. I have lots of other ideas for books, but I just thought, this was far too much for 300 pages. And there's more people that we need to meet. There's more places we need to go. And then we have to have everyone come together. And in the end, we need to have a solution. So those things were with me really early.
Gotcha. When you finished the first book, how did you start thinking about publishing and getting this book out, finding an audience, and kind of what was your process there?
Oh, so I had no experience. I had no network. I knew nothing about the industry. When I initially started, I had thought, okay, this is a bucket list item. I want to create something for my children that can sit on the shelf. If nobody else reads it, we'll read it. It'll be fine. I can go the self-publishing route. I can make 100 copies and just keep them around for friends and family, and that's that. So my eldest daughter graduated in June of 2018. We went on a road trip later that year. I took a cruise down the coast of Croatia. And on that cruise, it was a small ship, so all the passengers mingled, and I met a woman named Gina. And after I finished that cruise, I thought, okay, it's time to start writing. So I think I started writing Aqueous in October of 2018. I worked on it for probably 3 or 4 months. Then in Canada, we have this thing called summer every year, and the weather's usually terrible. So in summer, nothing gets done because people just need to be outside. And then I finished it up, I would say, in the fall of 2019. And at that point, I was in touch periodically with Gina because we had a really nice time on this cruise and we thought we should get together again. And I had mentioned that I was writing and that I had finished a novel, and it was something that I always wanted to do. And she said, oh, I like writing too. And we were just texting back and forth. And she said, did I mention that I was on... Oh, and before I reveal this, I should say that I was querying at this point. Like I was sending out the emails and the synopsises and the 10 or 20 pages that they wanted. And I had just started that, but it did feel, it feels like you're sending out your soul and you're never going to get back. I did have some great conference calls with some industry people, and that was just through friends trying to tell everyone what I was doing. At that point, I had come out of the closet with it and let a few friends read it. So they were helping me try and find people, which was nice. But this text conversation with Gina, she went on to say, did I mention that I was on the board of a publishing house and my best friend is like editor in chief? I said, no, Gina.
I think I would remember that.
I think I would have remembered that one. So she said, do you want Kate to read it? I said, yeah, I would love it if Kate would read it. And Kate read it. And Kate called and said, yeah, we love this. We've never done YA before. We normally, we dabble in poetry and memoir and that sort of thing. And we would love to give this a go. So we were off, and that was great. The only problem at that point, and I don't think that was even in... I think I finished fall of 2019, but I think that whole querying process might have been during 2020. I think I actually signed my contract with Red Hen Press in December of 2020. So at that point, though, we needed a slot, we needed a window for publication. And the only setback was, as a smaller press, they're very reputable, but they're indie, they're smaller, they do fewer books than the bigger houses do. She said, we really don't have time for this, especially with the pandemic, until May of 2023. So I had a long wait. But I was a newcomer. I was thankful for the opportunity, and I was willing to wait and just give it a shot.
Having that downtime, did that allow you time to start thinking about your follow-ups and kind of what the shape of that this series would ultimately take?
Yeah, I did that. I mean, I'm almost done book 2. But I think I also spent a lot of time on edits. I spent a lot of time getting to know people, learning about the industry, reading, I should be able to say to you by now, I've written 6 books since then, and that actually didn't happen. And I don't know why that didn't happen, but that didn't happen. But yeah, I've learned a lot since then, and I am appreciative for the time. I think if it had been rushed, I would have learned a lot less. I've been able to work directly with my publisher because I did give up on that querying process, and I don't have an agent. So that's a unique thing for me, is a lot of people don't do this without a literary agent. Will I look for one in the future? Perhaps. But I also think I could stick with Red Hen and publish the rest of the series and be perfectly happy with that too.
Wow.
So,
do you, was there anything that you learned during the editing process? Sometimes when you edit a book, it's more of a series of small adjustments that are just kind of made throughout the manuscript. And sometimes it's an aha moment. There's something that you're just too close to the manuscript, and it takes someone outside of your head to kind of see the thing that could make it work so much better. Was there ever a moment like that for you, or was it just a series of incrementally making the book better and better?
Yeah, there was nothing really drastic that was changed. We tried to make it a bit more suspenseful in the trials. There's a large cast of characters, so we tried to we had to get to know those characters a little bit more dialogue. But that was really Kate's only feedback. After that, it was just me reworking it to try and make it better, reading it aloud. Unfortunately, was something I didn't do until I started working on my podcast. And then there were little things I found, after I'd already signed off on that final draft. Anyway, I do think going into book 2, it will be more polished before I submit anything. I don't want to have the amount of work that I had with Aqueous with the next one. I think I had no idea that once you kind of surrender that manuscript to the publishing house, you no longer have control over that Word doc on your computer. Every little change has to be submitted, page 26 on paragraph 2, line 1 needs to be this and not that. And that is an astronomical amount of work for a comma, let's say.
Right.
And it just goes on and on. So I won't do that again. It'll be really clean before I ever submit anything again. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. When do you foresee book 2 hitting the shelves?
Oh, I don't know about that. That'll come down to the publisher, but I've got at least 2 more months worth of work on it to completion, I would think, and that'll be frantic. So, it needs to be built out quite a bit now. Even though I can see the whole story in my head, I couldn't see the characters, for example. I couldn't see exactly how the journey would take place and what would be, within each story. There has to be multiple storylines and different interaction between characters. And those take some time.
Great. Aqueous is available everywhere now. Visit your local bookstore, and if you don't see it on the shelf, ask them to get it. If you don't have a great local bookstore to go to, we'll put links to it where you can get it from Amazon in the show notes of this episode. Jade, if people are just discovering you and want to follow along the journey and look for news coming up and that sort of thing, is there a place online they can connect with you?
Absolutely. I'm really available on Instagram at Jade Shyback or my website, jadeshyback.com.
Excellent. We'll link those up to make it easy for folks to find you as well. Aqueous, available everywhere now. Go grab it. Jade, this has been so much fun chatting. Thank you so much for taking time to come on the show.
Really nice. Thank you.
That's our episode for today. There's so much more to come as we talk to authors about the craft of writing, but also the business of publishing. Be sure to subscribe to the Storycraft Cafe podcast in your favorite podcast app so that you never miss an episode. The Storycraft Cafe is made possible by Dabble. Writing a book is challenging. Your writing tool should not be. Dabble is an easy-to-use online writing tool packed with helpful features that allow beginning novelists and published authors to create amazing stories. Visit us at dabblewriter.com and start your free trial today. Thanks for listening.